They're expected across the Midlands too. It'll be fine and dry with periods of warm sunshine, temperatures reaching around 18 or 19 Celsius. Winds will be light once again. Some cloud will bubble up across northern England, but most places will stay dry with plenty of sunny spells. Sunniest towards the east coast, but a little bit fresher here with temperatures around 12 Celsius. The risk of some light rain across the far north of Scotland. Otherwise, it will be a fine day with lots of sunny spells, a little bit breezy across the far west. Plenty of blue skies for Northern Ireland and light winds too, feeling very warm for the time of year as temperatures reach around 19 Celsius, well above the early May average. A few showers moving into the far northwest as we move into this evening, otherwise a fine end for many.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome, I'm Alastair Stewart, and for the next 2 hours I'll be keeping you company on TV and radio with the stories that really matter all over the country and particularly today across the world. We have plenty coming up. Today is Victory in Europe Day, when Winston Churchill announced that the fight against Nazi Germany in Europe was over and with victory. 77 years on, another war rages in Europe. We'll be discussing that with people in the know. Plus, those historic results in Northern Ireland. What do they really mean? And if you really do the numbers, what does it really tell you? So we've all of that to come. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of today's news. Here's Ray Addison.
Thanks, Alistair. It's coming up to 1 minute past 12. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Sinn Féin's Vice President, Michelle O'Neill, says the party's victory ushers in a new era for Northern Ireland. The party won 27 seats in the election, overtaking the DUP, which dropped down to 25. Secretary of State Brandon Lewis has called on the parties to form a power-sharing executive as soon as possible. The region has been without one for several months after the DUP refused to be involved in protest over the post-Brexit protocol agreement. Former First Minister and GB News presenter Arlene Foster says the result will not cause a significant shift in the political balance.
Of course, it is a big moment in Northern Ireland's history. It's the first time that a Republican has been in the position to take the First Minister's post. However, we should not get carried away in terms of our place within the United Kingdom, because actually there has been no shift in terms of those who support the Union and those who support breaking away.
Senior Tories are accusing Sir Keir Starmer of hypocrisy as new details emerged into allegations that he broke lockdown rules last year. The Mail on Sunday has published a leaked memo which appears to suggest that a beer and curry event attended by the Labour leader and his deputy Angela Rayner was pre-planned. Sir Keir insists no lockdown rules were broken. However, police in Durham are investigating. Sir Keir is resisting calls to resign despite previously saying that the Prime Minister should step down over parties held at number 10 Downing Street. Boris Johnson says he'll deliver a so-called Super 7 of Brexit bills in the Queen's speech on Tuesday, which he says will cut red tape inherited from the EU. The Prime Minister told the Sunday Express that the new laws range from data reform to financial services, allowing Britain to, quote, thrive as a modern, dynamic and independent country. He's also expected to unveil measures to help struggling town centres, including plans to force landlords to rent out empty shops and make pavement cafes a permanent fixture. The Home Office is reviewing its security after protesters heckled Priti Patel at the Tory Spring Dinner in Nottinghamshire.
And I actually just want to start...
Priti Patel, your racist policies are killing people.
7 activists from the Green New Deal Rising group bought tickets to the event and then criticised government plans to send migrants to Rwanda. They accused the Home Secretary of racist and inhumane policies. Some of those at the dinner booed the activists, who were quickly led away. President Zelensky says all 300 women, children and elderly people have been rescued from the Azovstal steelworks in Mariupol. He says the second stage of the evacuation will now focus on removing wounded members of the Ukrainian military. Civilians and fighters have been trapped for weeks in bunkers within the plant. It's been the last holdout for Ukrainian forces in the city against Russian attacks. Well, President Zelensky says evil has been reborn 77 years after victory over Nazi Germany. Speaking ahead of Moscow's annual celebrations to mark the day, the president said Russia has desecrated the memory of those who fought in World War II. He also says Russia cannot hide from its responsibility for invading Ukraine.
We haven't withstood even a century. Our never again lasted for only 77 years. We missed the evil. It was reborn, again and now. This is understood by all countries and nations who support Ukraine today. And despite the new mask of the beast, they recognise him, because unlike some, they remember what our ancestors fought for and against.
The governor of Luhansk says at least 2 people have been killed after Russia bombed a school in the village of Bilohorivka in Ukraine. 60 remain buried under rubble and are feared dead. The governor says 90 were sheltering in the building at the time of the attack. Hong Kong has elected its new chief executive. John Lee, the sole candidate, was endorsed for the city's top job by a pro-Beijing committee. Lee said it was his historic mission to lead a new chapter for Hong Kong. The former Secretary for Security was previously responsible for implementing China's national security law to arrest pro-democracy demonstrators and shut down liberal media outlets. And a bridge has collapsed in northern Pakistan, swept away by water from a melted glacier. A recent heatwave caused huge amounts of water to run into the stream in Hassanabad and surrounding areas. Local media quote experts saying that the water volume at the Shispa Glacier Lake increased by 40% over the past 20 days. A further 33 glacial lakes are also at risk of bursting soon. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Ray, thanks very much indeed. It is VE Day, recalling the defeat of fascism in Europe. It was never billed as the war to end all wars. That was 1914-18. But it did give a generation hope, my parents' generation included, that it might be at least the end of war in Europe. 77 years on, war rages in Europe again. And you just heard President Zelensky say there's an awful lot of unfinished business out there. That's exactly what I'm delighted to say that we are going to talk about as our main story today. In Europe again, a war that has run little more than 2 months has changed, challenged and redefined so much across Europe. Russia will seek to jump on this anniversary to celebrate the progress of its special military operation tomorrow, which in truth has been a bloody debacle. The UK has emerged both as Ukraine's best buddy and Russia's public enemy number one. Sanctions as an act of war and restraint have entered new territory. Europe's reliance on Russian energy has been exposed as weak and short-sighted. Beyond oil, many of us have also learnt how reliant we are on Ukraine for wheat and fertilisers and a lot more besides. The economic impact of disruption has forced up inflation, worsened the cost of living crisis here at home and made governments rethink so much. NATO's acted strictly by its rules, but has developed clever new ways to help Ukraine. A non-member nation, albeit at risk. Nations long neutral now toy actively with NATO membership. And for the first time since the Cuban Missile Crisis of the 1960s, the use of nuclear weapons is openly discussed. Well, we'll be discussing all of that and more this afternoon with political and diplomatic experts, a retired senior military planner, a NATO man, an industrial policy expert and an internationally renowned journalist. We'll also take a final look at the local elections now that they're all done and dusted, especially the drama that is still unfolding in Northern Ireland with a former First Minister and the number cruncher, Sir John Curtis. And as always, we genuinely do want to hear your thoughts. Email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk, tweet me or GB News, go to Facebook, etc. All the rest of it, and do join in the conversation, which I'm delighted now to get underway with my three guests. Joining me are Rear Admiral Chris Parry, a regular on this programme and a man I always enjoy chatting to. Chris is a former NATO commander, former Ministry of Defence Director General. Rory McCallion is here again, another friend I've known for years and years, and he writes and commentates about industrial policy, economic matters and basically the state of commerce around the world. And finally, Emma Wolfe, who is a new friend and is very, very welcome indeed. Emma's a politics commentator, but she also writes internationally and has commentated from the United States, from Australia and right here, and is still published widely around the world. Great of you to join. I did take a deep breath and say that's the peg. But feel free to weave in anything else that you've either heard on our news bulletins here or that you think is germane to our reflection. I'm going to start with a brutal question for you, Chris, as a retired, very senior military man. Is there still much left to celebrate about VE Day?
I think we can all celebrate about VE Day. It marked the defeat of fascism. And we mustn't forget it was defeat of Japan, Germany and Italy, and the sorts of values and thinking that we thought we consigned to history. Now, of course, totalitarianism is the same wherever you find it, whether you find it on the left or the right. And, of course, as President Zelensky has said, that totalitarianism lived on behind the Iron Curtain. What I find really ironic about VE Day is we went to war in 1939 with France to liberate Poland. But it took us 50 years to actually liberate Poland, 1989. And here we are again with Poland under threat from one of the aggressors in 1939, that is Russia. And Russia has shown its true spots. It's an imperial power. It's a revanchist power. It wants to reclaim its status as a great power. Its national morale requires it to bully the rest of Europe. And we can talk about all the other neuroses that the Russian people and the Russian state have later on, I'm sure. We know they're focused on trying to neutralise the Baltic and the Black Sea as far as threats are concerned. Sure. And Ukraine is part of that. But I think what I always say to people, I've always said, is that peace and freedom don't keep themselves. They have to be kept.
Did we delude ourselves in 1945 or our predecessors, our parents and grandparents' generation?
I think despite the fact that we didn't achieve lasting peace forever and ever, I think of that line from one of the best war poets, lest we forget. And, you know, whether or not Victory in Europe Day means victory in Europe or peace in Europe forever, I think it's just so important that we commemorate. I think of my father, who saw active service, who died recently at the age of 92, and our grandparents' generation. And I think...
But does it shock you as a commentator? I can completely understand where Chris is coming from as a career military man, but as an objective commentator, does it surprise you the degree to which there are profound aspects of unfinished business now?
It is surprising, and it's not, of course, because we didn't deal with the Russian threat in 2014. We had warnings then repeatedly. 3 prime ministers didn't. That was a pretty stark warning in the last 10 years. So I think that this is inevitable. And maybe this is an important turning point at which we have to say, OK, it's VE Day.
Yeah. Talking of turning points, the economics of it have also all been stood on their head. As Emma just said, we didn't deal with Russia at the time of Ukraine and in the run-up to that. I mean, you could have said we didn't deal with Russia, rather, I should say, between Cuba and then as well. But to discover that so much of Eastern Europe that had thrown Soviet Union shackles off and was now standing alone and wanting to be free, democratic countries and what have you, totally reliant upon Russian energy, which allowed Russia to have a leverage like the old days of colonial imperialism.
Yeah, I mean, I find it saddening. I mean, I remember you reporting from Berlin when the wall was coming down and how hopeful, the great upsurge of hope that there was then. And what has happened over the last 10 or 15 years has been depressing, really, the way that we have declined to this point now. What you say about the situation now, the economic damage that is being inflicted as a result of the Ukraine situation. Yes, we've talked about that. We've talked about the impact on the supply chain, and it hasn't even really been unfolding yet. We're only starting to see it. The news from the agriculture front line, which I keep up with, we are surrounded by fields of rapeseed. I don't know if it's the same in Hampshire as it is in Salisbury. I asked, did the farmers pivot on a sixpence in the light of the Ukraine invasion? The answer is no. They were already planning to do it. So we're not going to see shortages in sunflower this year, and we're actually not going to see shortages in fertiliser this year. The concern that the farmers have is for next year. They've already used the fertiliser this year. They're worried about next year.
Fascinating.
You're right.
I want to take you back, all of you, but starting with Chris for obvious reasons, to the specifics of what's going on in Ukraine and the nature of that war. But it does tie in with all three of your analyses up to now. In terms of not dealing with Russia and the threat that you yourself first alluded to, was that because we overestimated their military might and their diplomatic influence and the rest of it? They've shown themselves in many respects, and you've tweeted this, not to be up to the job. And you were exchanging messages with me during the week about the Moskva episode, this fantastic, albeit built in Ukraine, ironically, but this cruise missile flagship of the Black Sea Fleet taken out by the Ukrainians.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying to members of my ex-ships companies that I'd be really embarrassed if I'd been hit by one of those missiles. It's not a terribly sophisticated missile, and I'm afraid the ship's company of the Moskva were asleep at the wheel. They weren't expecting to be attacked, and you and I have exchanged the operational capability report that the Russians did themselves in February that said that most of the missile systems either interfered with each other or didn't work at all. And yet this thing was sort of posing around in the middle of the Black Sea trying to overroar everybody and not able to defend itself. It would be embarrassing if you went to sea in a ship like that, and I suspect most of the Russian fleet, apart from its submarines, which are very good.
And you are a submariner?
No, I'm not. I'm an aviator. I can't stand submariners, I have to tell you. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you... What was the anecdote about the Falklands you were telling me?
No, I'm the only officer in NATO since 1945 to have actually sunk a submarine. So, and I was told when I went through training that if you want to be lucky with submariners, even though some of my best friends are submariners, you have to hate them. And if you do, you get lucky with them. And
I've got another question for you as well about Ukraine, which then segues directly to you two. And that is, and I said in my introduction, that NATO has trod the line very carefully. Article 5 says if a NATO member country is invaded, so if Ukraine was in NATO, then the rest of the gang would have to act immediately. The United States of America vetoed aircraft going from Poland directly to Ukraine, but now everybody is finding a way, as I said in my intro, cleverly to arm them, whether it's Polish tanks being backfilled by British tanks and what have you. Has NATO gone as far as it can and, in effect, reinvented itself without everybody else knowing?
I think NATO was on the way back, defending its sovereignty and territorial sort of limits. It's a very interesting question, Alistair, because I said to somebody this week, if Russia had attacked Finland and Sweden and not Ukraine, would NATO have intervened? I reckon they would have done, because A, it exposed NATO's northern flank, and somehow Sweden and Finland are closer, both in perceptual and geographic terms. So I think what's happening with Ukraine is, as you say, a stealth way of actually supporting Ukraine, and it's countries that are doing it, not NATO, of course, that's supporting Ukraine. But I would see that the only way which Ukraine is going to feel secure in future after this is all over, or if the conflict is frozen, is if it joins NATO. And frankly, the rest of us won't think that Ukraine's safe unless it joins NATO.
That's a huge political statement as well as a military statement, because everybody knows the 1945 VE Day settlement and, as you rightly pointed out, subsequently Japan and the Far East. But that was about the United Nations globally. It was about the European Union and NATO within Europe and across the Atlantic. All of that is changing, and if NATO changes, the EU has to change, and you're now hearing much more, not belligerent, that's the wrong word, but willing to act conversation from the upper reaches of the European Union, which you would not have heard 10 years ago. Trump had to tell them to spend more on NATO.
I think the last 2 months, I think this conflict has really drawn a focus on whether NATO is fit for purpose, but also the role and what they can actually do. I think that these fine lines, I'm not sure Putin actually cares about these fine lines about borders and, you know, are we supplying defensive or offensive weapons? All these sort of little shimmy-shallying around that we've had to do in the last 2 months in terms of really helping Ukraine but not overstepping the mark. I think that there are going to be very important conversations about what NATO will do going forward and, you know, bringing it into the 21st century and dealing with threats like Putin. I think this has also highlighted just the chaos, the dysfunctionality of the Kremlin. You know, it's quite clear that Putin is very, very isolated there, that his forces were not prepared properly. So I think, you know, we are seeing a much weaker... No?
Well, no, I mean, all I would say, Emma, is if you keep any army on the ground in the cold and wet for 8 weeks, they're going to be pretty useless. I heard stories on Russian Twitter of tank crews, for example, getting hold of radiators and hooking them up to the tank batteries because they were so cold. So, of course, when they came to start the tanks, they're not going to work. And they consumed all their stores, all their logistics and all that sort of thing. We shouldn't underestimate the effect of mass in the Russian armed forces. If they can bring a lot of mass to bear, they will prevail. And actually, they've not done badly in the south. We've all looked at the north by Kiev and Kharkiv. Just look at the geography. It's all forest up there. That's not great tank or armoured vehicle country. You go down south, it's steppe country. It's the part of Ukraine through which the Germans drove, of course, to get to Stalingrad. It's where the Russians went back the other way. It's actually quite good for armoured warfare. And so what's happened is they have got bogged down, Emma. They weren't best placed, as I said, after 8 weeks in the cold and wet. But don't underestimate them. If they actually turn the mass onto all this, they can prevail. I have to say...
I'm going to back, only because of the time, two final very quick questions. The first one is to you, Rory. It's intriguing listening to how political institutions can redefine and reset themselves and revalue their objectives, and how military can rearm and so on and so forth. In terms of the key energy aspect, which is cost of living crisis here at home as well, you cannot build a mini Rolls-Royce nuclear power station overnight. You can commit to build one every X years, as Johnson has done so. You can go to the Middle East and try and cut a deal with Qatar or Kuwait or whoever it might be, and you may succeed or you may not. Those economic and industrial lessons that this teaches us will take a lot longer than the politics or the defence bits to put in place.
Yes, it's going to take years to resolve, and I hope that the lessons have actually been learned. There's a lot of lessons to pick up from history, but just talking about right now, there are things that we can do quickly, and one of them is actually going in for shale gas, going for fracking, because you can get those wells working really pretty quickly within a matter of months. And, you know, there are genuine environmental concerns, but at the same time...
Which the government have asked them to reconsider just in case.
Yes, just in case.
My final question, and it's going to start with you, because I warned you I wanted to ask you it because of your area of expertise, but I'd love you two to come in on it as well. The other crucial thing that struck me when I was thinking about this theme to talk to you guys and gals about was that in 45, in my view, one of the greatest ever American presidents, Roosevelt, was in charge. He was pretty good economically and he was pretty good democratically. Churchill is always a sort of Marmite figure, but in my view, one of the great heroes of British history, and I will not be turned away from that. And even Stalin, who was a bad and evil man, but knew what he was doing and was pretty damned competent when it came to it. When you compare those three with our current cast of characters around the world, Macron, Biden, even Johnson on a bad day, don't compare terribly well.
They really don't. The intellectual calibre, the sort of moral heft of these men just does not. And we're talking a lot at the moment. You know, is Sir Keir Starmer and Boris Johnson the best that we can have at the moment? But absolutely, internationally, you look around the world, there's just no comparison, is there? No. Although, of course, our Prime Minister is obsessed with Churchill and wants to be Churchill and writes obsessively about him.
I mean, I think any biographer of Johnson would say, and I will come to you too, but would say, look, you know, if you want a headmaster's report to be called by Zelensky the hero of the day and public enemy number one by the Kremlin, that's perhaps not too bad. Churchill could talk to military leaders because he'd been there, done it himself. Roosevelt was never a military man, but had that intellect.
I think the basic problem we've got, Alistair, is that if you look at the generation of the 60s, for example, or 70s, they'd all seen the Second World War. They'd all lived through it. They had experience of it. And also the 50s and 60s were really the high point of statecraft. Now, let's just remember, Churchill was never elected Prime Minister during the war. Stalin wasn't elected. And what we've got now are people who can win elections but don't do statecraft. Yeah. That's the whole point. I agree with Emma's point. Yeah. There's an intellectual issue. You've got to apply yourself to the business of high politics if you want to mean it. Yeah. Now, if you're a military officer, von Clausewitz, the famous theorist, said your sole responsibility as a military officer is be the best you can at your profession. Yeah. It's the same with politicians. That's not the case. My boss is shouting at me, but I promised you, and I want you to give this comment. It's the other thing about Roosevelt, not only about the intellectual clout, which I both accept, was, my God, he knew his economics and the New Deal and all the rest of it. And he had to be stopped being elected a third time.
Fourth time.
Fourth time, rather.
Yeah, he listened to Keynes, J.M. Keynes, above all else. And J.K. Galbraith, who I had the privilege of meeting about 30 years ago, back when I were a lad. And they talked about the role of the state in stimulating employment and economic activity. I did want to make a point about self-inflicted economic damage, which we've done over the last 2 years, but...
Yeah, no, there we have to have... So all we need then to resolve the world in the future is another John Maynard Keynes, another couple of Roosevelts. For the time being, thank you all very much indeed. Great to see you. I hope you found that fruitful. Don't forget, I really do want to hear what you have to say as well. You're listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. We've lots more coming up on today's programme, including all of the latest on Northern Ireland following the historic Assembly vote. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking fine for most, with plenty of warm spring sunshine to enjoy. Let's take a look at the details. Southwest England will be warm and sunny, with just a little bit of low cloud floating around from time to time. Temperatures will reach close to 20 Celsius with light winds as well. Some afternoon cloud bubbling up across parts of southeast England and the London area, but it will stay dry with plenty of warm sunshine. Dry for Wales too, with further sunny spells, a little bit breezy towards the coast, but feeling warm in the sunshine as temperatures reach 21 Celsius. Dry across the Midlands and up into northwest England as well. Perhaps some low cloud lapping onto coastal stretches from time to time. Temperatures reaching 19 Celsius, that's well above average for early May. After a blue sky morning, the cloud will increase across northeast England this afternoon. However, there will be some sunny spells, warm inland but a little fresher along the coast. Much of Scotland will be fine with spells of warm sunshine, just the low risk of the odd shower developing, but most places will miss these and stay dry. Increasing cloud amounts from the west across Northern Ireland, with the best of the sunshine holding on across the far east of the country, highs reaching around 18 or 19 Celsius. Through into this evening, much of the UK will stay dry with some sunny spells ahead of dusk, and that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's just coming up to 12:30 and you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News TV and radio. As you may have heard, Sinn Féin has won most seats in the Northern Ireland Assembly for the first time. A unionist party has been the largest in government since Northern Ireland was formed in 1921. Now a nationalist party is the largest in Stormont. And of course, the result of this election will have huge significance for the future of the Northern Ireland Protocol, that bit of the Brexit deal that was supposed to resolve matters in Northern Ireland and its relationship both with the EU and with the United Kingdom. But will the elected get a chance to govern? What is next for Northern Ireland? I'm delighted now to be joined by my good friend and fellow GB News presenter, the former First Minister, Arlene Foster. You have had a busy day, Arlene, so I'm going to cut straight to the chase. Who is closest to the truth? And for those of you consuming this conversation on radio rather than television, I am now holding up the Observer newspaper that says, seismic Sinn Féin victory fuels debate on the future of the Union, whereas the Sunday Times says, Sinn Féin win reawakens Brexit tension. Is it about the Union or is it about Brexit, Arlene?
It's about all of those things, as is always the case, Alistair, in Northern Ireland. Nothing's ever straightforward. I mean, let's be very clear. This has been a very successful election for Sinn Féin. They didn't gain any seats. They retained the 27 seats that they had. The DUP lost 2 seats and then had one of their members become an independent. So Sinn Féin is the largest party. But they aren't the largest designation. Now, what do I mean by that? In Northern Ireland politics, we have a mandatory coalition, Alistair, and it depends on unionism, nationalism and others. For the executive to be formed, both unionism and nationalism have to come in together in a power-sharing executive. And before the election, well before the election, unionism made it very clear to the United Kingdom government that unless and until they dealt with the protocol issues, there wouldn't be a new executive formed in Northern Ireland. So therefore, it is about Brexit, it is about the protocol. It's also about the fact that whilst Sinn Féin is the largest party at Stormont, they are not the largest designation. And I could see some people getting a little bit carried away by the fact that Sinn Féin was the largest party. This mean that we were going to have a border poll? Well, no, It doesn't. because the majority of people in Northern Ireland still support parties that want to remain within the United Kingdom.
Sure. Well, it's one of those weird things about proportional representation that everybody always bangs on about. But if you add up, as I know you've done, because I heard you talking to Deanna about it earlier on, all of the votes cast, forget who won in each constituency and on this list, but the total votes cast would suggest that if those elections had been a border poll, the Unionists would have won. There's no doubt about it. But here's the criticism that you have to address. And I got on Twitter, people say, oh, you know, here's Arlene having another go on it. Where's the Sinn Féin? Well, we spoke to Sinn Féin at length yesterday. But here's the point. You stand accused by the people of Northern Ireland of dragging your feet over progress. And that's not only why Sinn Féin did have a good day, but so too did the Alliance. And isn't that the real danger for you, as it proved 10 years ago for Trimble's official unionist? You've had your day, you're dragging your feet, just get on with it.
Well, unionism certainly hasn't had its day. We're still very much ahead, and thank you for reflecting that in your comments. But first of all, Alistair, I'm not in charge of the Democratic Unionist Party anymore. I am just your good friend and a GBNews presenter and columnist now. So I am giving you what I think is going on here in Northern Ireland and what I have seen. Unionism is very united against the Northern Ireland Protocol. They believe that it goes to the very heart of our place within the UK because goods are checked coming from Great Britain into Northern Ireland. The internal market has been fractured, and indeed our way of life has been dealt a blow as well, because we're having to look to other sources for our supplies and our goods. Now, that's wrong. We're part of the United Kingdom. The consent principle of the Belfast Agreement is very clear that our status as a member of the United Kingdom does not change until the majority of people here say otherwise. What's happening today is that you will see a lot of Sinn Féin activists and Sinn Féin leadership saying that though this means that we must have a border poll, it doesn't. It simply doesn't mean that. What it means is that Sinn Féin have become the largest party. They have the right to nominate a First Minister, but that won't happen because the largest unionist party has said until the protocol's dealt with, they won't nominate a Deputy First Minister. And the two are joint at the hip, if I may say that. One can't act without the other. One can't get appointed without the other. And therefore, it'll not happen.
Sure. And just in case, I know that, you know that, but just in case anyone kind enough to be listening to our conversation on TV or radio, that is all enshrined in the Good Friday Agreement. It's not just what Arlene Foster thinks, it's what was agreed by all of those good men and women, including lovely Mo Molam, all of those years back. Here's just one final quick one, though. Jeffrey Donaldson's writing in the Sunday Telegraph today that Westminster law needs to be changed to make progress. What needs to change in Westminster law to make progress?
Yeah, so we've been involved in a process of negotiation with the European Union about changing the protocol now for nearly 18 months, and they, in their usual manner, have been prevaricating and not coming to the table to respect unionism in Northern Ireland. So therefore, I think what Sir Geoffrey is indicating is that the Prime Minister is going to have to take action to protect the internal market and to take action to preserve the sovereignty of the United Kingdom. And so I think we'll hear a lot about this in the coming days, Alistair. It may not be explicitly in the Queen's speech, but I think you'll see some language in there which will allow the Prime Minister to deal with these issues.
So do I, as a matter of interest, but you're closer to it than I am. Arlene, genuinely a pleasure. I know you've had an incredibly busy morning, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I hope you managed to enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you very much indeed. Arlene Foster there, speaking from Northern Ireland. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. We've plenty more still to come this afternoon, including we'll be talking to two sisters, one Army girl and one Bletchley girl, on their memories of the war, this VE Day, all looked after by the brilliant Tessa Dunlop. That's right after this break.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle, and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. It is 12:37, just coming up to 12:38, and you're watching Alastair Stewart and Friends here on GB News TV and radio. You've been getting in touch with your thoughts about VE Day. Elaine says VE Day is a reminder of the veterans who fought against a dictatorship and is the very reason why everybody should vote. These soldiers who died would be so disappointed at the voting polls last week. I think that's a reference to just 30% of people being bothered to go down there. Stafford joins the conversation. My dad proposed to my mum on VE Day. Oh, great story. Thank you for that. They went on to get engaged. Dad was a rear gunner in Lancaster Bombers. Once the war was over, he decided to ask to marry him. And they were married for 67 years. I love that story. Thank you for sending it in, and I'm glad I had the chance to read it out. Peter, tomorrow isn't just Russia's celebration of the end of the war in Europe. The Channel Islands, being the only part of the United Kingdom occupied by the Germans, were not liberated until the 9th of May. It's a bank holiday there. Do keep those views coming in and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are at GB News. So if you miss any of our programmes, you can catch them up on the YouTube channel. Now, as my lovely correspondents just reminded you, and as our first 20 minutes of the programme underlined, it is VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, recalling the defeat of fascism. A plethora of guests join me now, both a top historian as well as two sisters, one of them aged 96, the other 98, who have written a book about their memories of the historic war and their recollections of the time, including both signing the Official Secrets Act, one as an army girl and the other as a Bletchley codebreaker. I genuinely could not be more honoured. And there they are right now with my lovely friend on the left of your screen, the historian Dr. Tessa Dunlop. And there are the sisters, and they are Jean and Pat Outram. Before we come to Jean and Pat, Tessa, as an historian, and you've written a beautiful book about the involvement of women in the war and the vitality and the importance of their contribution, as an historian, why do you think we should still be remembering and celebrating VE Day?
I think it's never been more important than at the moment, Alistair. The cost of war, the terror of war, and also the different impact. We're at right now at peace in Britain, and 77 years ago, peace was declared. But as these two sisters will tell you, they were celebrating VE Day as their father was still a prisoner of war with the Japanese.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we only see history through our own lens.
And it is absolutely vital, but also the fact that they were there, Jean and Pat, frontliners. I think the fact, Jean and Pat, that you've decided not to go to church at the normal service that you do go to, but to join in this conversation, underlines why it matters to you. I've just heard Tessa say it, but Jean, Pat, in whatever order you like, and Tessa will orchestrate it for me, why does it still matter to you 70 plus years on?
I'm going to translate a bit because our speaker's very quiet. Pat, why is VE Day still so important to you?
Well, it was the end of a long period, and some of the time it had not been all that certain that we were winning the war. And of course, most of all, we thought we would see our father again.
And Jean was in Italy for the last bit of the war. You were a fanny, weren't you, Jean?
Yes.
What's a fanny?
First aid nursing yeomanry, which is something I didn't do any of, but it was a women's organisation, a women's force.
That's right, and you were attached to the SOE, and you were a code cipher, and when war was declared over, VE Day, you were actually in Italy, weren't you?
Yes.
Do you remember anything of that day, Jean?
Yes, I do, because we were all breathless waiting to find out what was going to happen next. I'd been on a night watch in the bit of where I was working, studying, that sort of thing, and it came out and went back to my office in the morning and sort of thing, and I suddenly heard the guns going off and the noises and everything, and thought, we're celebrating and this is the end.
Alistair, I don't know if you're interested, but I have here a copy of the letter that Jean sent her sister Pat, who was in London and saw the palace and the Queen. She sent her a letter on VE Day from Italy. Will we read a little bit, Jean, of this?
Yes, you read.
This is just so wonderful and overwhelming, Pat. One knew it was on its way, but it just leaves me feeling mentally exhausted. I wish I had been in London. It must have been colossal. Oh, honey, it's glorious, isn't it? No more organised murder in all of Europe. That was Jean writing to Pat. Pat, what were you doing in London at the time?
Well, I was in the Women's Royal Naval Service, and I was in London because my main job in the war was because I knew German. We had an Austrian housekeeper at home, and I'd learnt conversational German. So I spent the war actually listening to German naval messages over the radio. By the end of the war, of course, that was not happening. And so I was then attached to one of the ministries in London to read through the evidence that our troops were sending back from Germany to see if we could spot enemy who would need to be tried at Munich.
And actually, on VE Day, you took time off to go to the palace, didn't you?
Oh, several of us went to the palace. It seemed the one place to be on VE Day.
And you saw the Queen and our current Queen.
We did. I think they all came out on the balcony. We were all standing around below and cheering. I saw Lord Louis Mountbatten, I think, driving maybe to the Abbey or somewhere. And it was just a wonderful day.
Tessa, let me just interrupt to tell you and also Pat and Jean that folk who are listening to our conversation on radio rather than television are indeed looking at Her Majesty the Queen when she was Princess Elizabeth, the Queen Mum, Churchill, George VI and Princess Margaret, Princess Rose, there on the balcony. And we saw some of those extraordinary images of people there. That's a top shot now of the area just by the Victoria Monument outside Buckingham Palace. Tessa, you and I have talked about your brilliant book, and I'm not just saying that because you're a friend of mine. It is a brilliant book about the army girls. But I gather those two extraordinary women sitting to your left have also resolved to produce a book, or have perhaps already done it and finished it.
Yes.
Is it with the publishers yet? I cannot wait to read it. Can they tell us a little bit about the high points?
Yes. So there's two books, isn't there? There's one about your dad, and there's also the book about you code-breaking sisters. Tell Alistair, which are you most proud of? Code-breaking sisters, I think.
Well, in a way, but, we did admire our father very much, and even more when he got home and told us how he had worked in the camp for our prisoners. Yes, I think it was a very satisfactory memory to look back on.
Just a final note, going back to that original letter from Jean on VE Day. She writes here, I was on duty, so we heard the King's broadcast. It's also dramatic and happy. And Churchill's message to the Far East, where their father was hopeful. She quotes Churchill, "Lift up our hearts, for we are coming." Do you remember that, Jean?
I do remember that. I know we didn't physically ourselves go, but we were there. We were part of it.
You were. You absolutely were. Aren't they remarkable, Alistair? They're two most remarkable sisters. They live on their own. They are such firm friends of mine. I've known Pat since Bletchley Girls, 10 years now. I tell you what, she's quite a disciplinarian. You have to remember your thank you letters. And Jean, a wonderful sister.
Well, my mum was also a wren, as we call it, so I know a little of the discipline and the service that the wrens gave. And, of course, the Princess Royal, Princess Anne, was a very senior wren and was the boss person of that organisation until, unfortunately, it was merged, something that my mother never quite forgave the Ministry of Defence for. We're getting a few calls to say that folk recognise the two main medals that Jean and Pat have got, but would love an explanation on the red one there, which I think is on Jean's
now this
coat.
Pat, over to you.
Pat,
Tell us
I beg your
about
pardon.
this beauty.
Well, that medal is my Légion d'honneur, which the French government very generously gave some of us their very glamorous, I think, medal, the Légion d'honneur. Not that I was in France, but I suppose the work we were doing helped to liberate France, and I thought that was extraordinarily generous of them.
And this one
No, Tessa. The extraordinary thing is the modesty with which she says that. And she said, oh, yes, it's a Légion d'honneur. I mean, blimey, well done, utterly brilliantly. And the Bletchley women and the code breakers and the rest of them did help liberate Europe and did help win the war, and as has been observed by all great historians, lovely Tessa included, saved literally hundreds and thousands of lives. Truly extraordinary. Tessa, we've got a couple of minutes left only, and I want to do this through you because it'll be easier for the sisters to get where we're coming from, and for folk at home watching on television or listening on radio. I want you to ask them what they make of what's going on in Ukraine right now, because they gave such magnificent service to try and stop that happening again, which is part of VE Day, but with their great wisdom and experience. And I don't want anything politics, it's not my business. Whatever they think is entirely a matter for them. But I'd love to know what two fantastic women like Jean and Pat think when they see what's unfolding in Ukraine right now.
Pat, did you hear that? Alistair would like to know your opinion on the horror that is Ukraine at the moment, when you fought so hard all those years ago to stop this happening again. How does it make you feel in extreme old age?
I feel absolutely appalled that there is this invasion of Ukraine. I have actually been there on one of my trips as producer of the Sky at Night astronomy program, and we did go to Russia at that time. That time a peaceful country. There is no reason or justification for this invasion, and I feel very strongly about it.
And Pat, would you echo your sister's thoughts on Ukraine? Do you watch the news up in Lancashire?
Oh, I do watch it. I live on my own up there, but I do put the news on and try and keep up to date with what is going on in the world. It's not always easy. Sometimes I hardly credit what I'm hearing.
It's terrible, isn't it? Yeah, universally, they're both genuinely appalled. And again, that conflict that they felt on VE Day, the Pacific War ongoing, so often, we talk of we've had peace since 45, but in fact, have we ever had total global peace since World War II?
Tessa, you're a total star, and thank you for helping all of us hear so much wisdom and experience from lovely Pat and Jean. And Jean, they're both exceptional women, but we've already had the Légion d'honneur as a throwaway line, and when I was a producer on Sky at Night as a throwaway line. I mean, we are in the company of giants, we really are. Pat and Jean, thank you both so much for your service all those years ago and for sharing those wonderful insights of their then and of now with us here on GB News. And Tessa, it was your idea, and I cannot thank you enough, because that's one of the best items I've ever done on Alastair Stewart and Friends. So my love to you and my love to Pat and Jean. Thank you all very, very much indeed.
He thinks you're one of the best things he's had on the show.
Well, I think we've thoroughly enjoyed being on your programme. Very grateful to Tessa for arranging it.
I think it's sherry time, isn't it, I think?
I think so, yeah.
A large amontillado all round. Pat, Jean and Tessa, thank you so much, all of you. God bless and have a wonderful Sunday afternoon. Goodness gracious me. What wonderful people, and I hope wonderful telly and or radio, depending on how you were consuming it. That was my good friend, the brilliant historian, Dr. Tessa Dunlop, with Jean and Pat Outram. Légion d'honneur, Sky at night, been there, done it, Bletchley Park. Oh. Sticking with the VE Day anniversary, John Roberts served during the conflict. We were honoured that he wanted to talk to us about his memories of the day. John now works with the Royal British Legion, giving talks about his experiences of the war. And he told us of the excitement when the news broke that the war was finally over.
I was actually in Canada starting my flying training then. It wasn't all that easy in Canada, or that part of Canada, because you had to have what they called a liquor license. You couldn't just go into a bar and drink like we do here. You had to hand over a bit of paper to get a drink. So it was quite difficult to get drunk. But everybody was so excited that goodness knows what happened. Well, you can probably guess that I'm a sailor, and sailors like girls. So what I was looking forward to was getting back to England, to where I had a girlfriend. When the war ended and I was in Canada, there were so many people waiting to come back to England that it was 2 weeks before I could come. So I went down to New York, and I went into Radio City to see television. I'd never seen television before. And I was selected to go behind the screen to be televised so all my friends could see me. So many people died. I think to not remember them is really disgraceful. I'm 98 now, and I flew in the Fleet Air Arm. My engine never stopped, so I never had to bail out. I never had to ditch in the water. I've been very, very lucky, and I was never torpedoed in my ships. The United States stopped supplying Japan with oil, and that was very bad news for Japan. So that's why they attacked the United States. And really, if we go on being too beastly to Putin, I wonder if he will do the same as Hitler and the Japanese. You know, we push them so far that they go to war.
So insightful from John Roberts, who saw and served and now works with the great Royal British Legion, sharing those memories that we might remember. Now, we mentioned at the top of the programme that we'd be talking to Sir John Curtis, the number cruncher, a little later on in the programme for a calm, objective reflection on the local elections, how you voted. And I asked for any comments that you may have, and you have been busy as always. Let's start with James, who says, we here in the north of Ireland have been sold down the river by Boris Johnson with his lies and falsehoods, and Lord Frost and the rest of the Tory party that lied to us in order to get his oven-ready deal done. Well, it's not oven-ready. It's been a complete disaster. I and my family are unionists, and I've always voted unionist. I voted Sinn Féin. Their policies were a lot clearer, and the protocol is not an issue for ordinary people here. Only unionist political parties who feel it's too close to the Republic. They're the ones that have a problem with it, not the ordinary people. Paul says, I'm all for mandatory voting, but why isn't there the option to vote for none of the above? I suppose you could always just abstain, but there we go. If we were given this option, more people would probably make an effort to go to the polling stations, and there'd be a more accurate record of the disgruntled voters out there, rather than just guessing at figures like 70% of you not bothering to vote at all. Keep those opinions coming in about VE Day, about the situation in Northern Ireland, and indeed about politics more generally. It is 4 minutes to 1. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and Friends. Lots more still to come in the final hour of the programme after the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking fine for most, with plenty of warm spring sunshine to enjoy. Let's take a look at the details. Southwest England will be warm and sunny, with just a little bit of low cloud floating around from time to time. Temperatures will reach close to 20 Celsius with light winds as well. Some afternoon cloud bubbling up across parts of southeast England and the London area, but it will stay dry with plenty of warm sunshine. Dry for Wales too, with further sunny spells, a little bit breezy towards the coast, but feeling warm in the sunshine as temperatures reach 21 Celsius. Dry across the Midlands and up into northwest England as well. Perhaps some low cloud lapping onto coastal stretches from time to time. Temperatures reaching 19 Celsius, that's well above average for early May. After a blue sky morning, the cloud will increase across northeast England this afternoon. However, there will be some sunny spells, warm inland but a little fresher along the coast. Much of Scotland will be fine with spells of warm sunshine, just the low risk of the odd shower developing, but most places will miss these and stay dry. Increasing cloud amounts from the west across Northern Ireland, with the best of the sunshine holding on across the far east of the country, highs reaching around 18 or 19 Celsius. Through into this evening, much of the UK will stay dry with some sunny spells ahead of dusk, and that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable, and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome. If you have just joined us, I'm Alastair Stewart, and the time is 22 seconds past 1 o'clock. I love to do that occasionally, but it's just after 1. And we're into the final hour of our programme. I'll be keeping you company here on TV and radio, with plenty more still to come, including some more of our top discussion, marking 77 years since victory in Europe. We're discussing that as another war rages within Europe, and what is the impact of it all on our international structures, our systems, and what we've learned from it, if anything at all. We'll be hearing from expert guests who really are in the know. All of that to come, but first let's bring you right up to date with all of the day's news. Here's Ray Addison.
Good afternoon. It's 1 minute and 7 seconds past 1 o'clock. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Sinn Féin's Vice President Michelle O'Neill says the party's victory ushers in a new era for Northern Ireland. The party won 27 seats in the election, overtaking the DUP, which dropped down to 25. Secretary of State Brandon Lewis has called on the parties to form a power-sharing executive as soon as possible. The region has been without one for several months after the DUP refused to be involved in protest over the post-Brexit protocol agreement. Former First Minister and GB News presenter Arlene Foster says the result will not cause a significant shift in the political balance.
Of course, it is a big moment in Northern Ireland's history. It's the first time that a Republican has been in the position to take the First Minister's post. However, we should not get carried away in terms of our place within the United Kingdom, because actually there has been no shift in terms of those who support the Union and those who support breaking away.
Senior Tories are accusing Sir Keir Starmer of hypocrisy as new details emerged into allegations that he broke lockdown rules last year. The Mail on Sunday has published a leaked memo which appears to suggest that a beer and curry event attended by the Labour leader and his deputy Angela Rayner was pre-planned. Sir Keir insists no lockdown rules were broken. However, police in Durham are investigating. Sir Keir is resisting calls to resign, despite previously saying that the Prime Minister should step down over parties at number 10. Boris Johnson says he'll deliver a so-called Super 7 of Brexit bills in the Queen's speech on Tuesday, which he claims will cut red tape inherited from the EU. The Prime Minister told the Sunday Express that the new laws range from data reform to financial services, allowing Britain to, quote, thrive as a modern, dynamic and independent country. He's also expected to unveil measures to help struggling town centres, including plans to force landlords to rent out empty shops and make pavement cafes a permanent fixture. The Home Office is reviewing its security after protesters heckled Priti Patel at the Tory spring dinner in Nottinghamshire.
And I actually just want to start...
Priti Patel, your racist policies are killing people.
7 activists from the Green New Deal Rising group bought tickets to the event and then criticised government plans to send migrants to Rwanda. They accused the Home Secretary of racist and inhumane policies. Some of those at the dinner booed the activists, who were quickly led away. President Zelensky says all 300 women, children and elderly people have been rescued from the Azovstal steelworks in Mariupol. He says the second stage of the evacuation will now focus on removing wounded members of the Ukrainian military. Civilians and fighters have been trapped for weeks in bunkers within the plant. It's been the last holdout for Ukrainian forces in the city against Russian attacks. The governor of Luhansk says at least 2 people have been killed after Russia bombed a school in the village of Bilohorivka in Ukraine. 60 remain buried under the rubble and are feared dead. The governor says 90 were sheltering in the building at the time of the attack.
An aircraft bomb went into a school. Unfortunately, it's completely destroyed. Right now, emergency service workers are clearing the debris, but there were 60 people hiding from the shelling. The school was destroyed completely. Considering it was an aircraft bomb, the temperature was wild. Of course, the emergency services workers will try to clear the debris as fast as they can, but the chances of people still being alive are small. But we hope for the best.
Hong Kong has elected its new chief executive. John Lee, the sole candidate, was endorsed for the city's top job by a pro-Beijing committee. Mr. Lee said it was his historic mission to lead a new chapter for Hong Kong. The former Secretary for Security was responsible for implementing China's national security law to arrest pro-democracy demonstrators and shut down liberal media outlets. A bridge has collapsed in northern Pakistan, swept away by water from a melted glacier. A recent heatwave caused huge amounts of water to run into the stream in Hassanabad and surrounding areas. Local media quote experts saying that the water volume at the Shispa Glacier Lake increased by 40% over the past 20 days. A further 33 glacier lakes are at risk of bursting soon. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Ray, thanks very much indeed. We've been looking in depth this afternoon about VE Day, the 77th anniversary, 77 years on, but in the context of a new war raging across Europe. How much of an impact does that have on all of our international systems, and to what extent is there a sense of a new world order, the one that was established in the wake of 1945, certainly at best showing strain, if not fractures? I'm delighted to have back in the studio live with me Chris Parry and Rory McCallion and Emma Wolfe, but also joining us another friend who is a good friend to this programme and of mine, the Defence Editor-in-Chief Foreign Correspondent of The Telegraph, Con Coughlin. Con, great to see you again. Thank you very much indeed for finding time. From the United Nations to NATO, that whole global diplomatic structure owes its place in many respects to VE Day. Is it now unravelling in the light of what has unfolded in Ukraine?
Well, good afternoon, Alistair, and great to be with you again. I think you mentioned the UN and you mentioned NATO, and there are two very different stories there. I think when you look at the United Nations, which has managed to keep the peace since the end of the Second World War, I think it's going to be under intense scrutiny now, particularly the dynamics of the Security Council. With Russia still a member and China, with its alliance with Russia, also on the Security Council, the prospects of the UN delivering anything positive on issues like Ukraine or even Taiwan, which is still excluded from the UN in many respects, is very unlikely. But then you look at NATO, and I think I've said this on your programme before, Alistair, that Putin's done us an enormous favour because he's breathed new life into the alliance. It's found its mojo. It understands, the scale of the threat, and of course we now have the enticing prospect of having both Finland and Sweden join NATO's ranks, which will increase its solidarity.
Con, the next voice that you will hear will be Chris Parry, who I know that you know both as a retired top military man, but also as a top academic on war studies. Your little head was nearly falling off when Con was saying that.
Yeah, I think Ukraine is a symptom, not a cause of what's happening in the world today. I think for a long time now, we've seen the world split into two blocks, effectively. We're seeing the Eurasian autocrats of China, Russia and Iran grouping together. They're seeking to dominate the whole Eurasian continent and the waters around it.
Forgive me for butting in, but was that why you were equally angry when Ray's news bulletin reported on the election in Hong Kong? I mean, you look furious.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to say it was an election, of course, is totally spurious. It's a selection by the Chinese Communist Party. But what was forming, I think, very rapidly, even before Ukraine, was an opposing bloc, which essentially I would call the maritime democracies. And that is the United States, Canada, parts of Europe, more parts of Europe now after Ukraine, certainly the United Kingdom, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and I think eventually India.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to you on Australia particularly in a moment because you've worked there and written about it. We're going to bring Con McCaughlin back in again, if I may, at that point, because I did interrupt you, but I was desperate that you and my viewers and listeners heard what Chris had to say. But here's the second point, and that's why I love live news programmes, because he raised it. The other thing that you and I talked about when you were last on the programme, I think with Nick Gowing, if I remember rightly, but it doesn't matter, was the fact that China is the other bit of unfinished business. I mean, if Putin takes a real spanking in Ukraine, then it may not emerge. But at the moment, he is still playing fast and loose with Beijing, and Beijing is still playing fast and loose with us.
Yes, well, I mean, Chris is quite right to be incensed by what's gone on in Hong Kong. And I think, I mean, I've been discussing Hong Kong with my Foreign Office contacts this week, and this is a great stain on the West that this has happened, that democracy has been completely crushed in a country by the Chinese Communist Party. And this is a wake-up call on the same scale, to my mind, as the invasion of Ukraine. But you raised the issue of the alliance between China and Russia. And what is important when we're looking at this, and I'd be interested to hear what Chris says on this, but China's very much the dominant partner. China regards Russia, as somebody once put it to me, as nothing more than a gas station. And Russia has a very small economy. It's very dependent on its oil and gas exports. And I think, judging from what we're seeing on the ground in Ukraine, the war has not gone well. No. Tomorrow, instead of celebrating a great victory in Ukraine on May the 9th, Victory Day, they will have to try and spin some other story, probably declaring a state of war because they're losing. Okay. And when China sees this, they think, well, what's the point of having a relationship with Russia?
Absolutely. So again, for people listening on radio or yourself, Con, the next voice will once again be Chris Parry, followed then by Emma Wolfe. And I want you to address particularly that point about China-Russia relationships and who's a petrol station and who's a filling pump. And then I want you to come in, and that's Rory McCallion, who I don't think you know, but is an old mate of mine. That crucial difference between Russia and China, which is economic, commercial, business, trade, supply, and the rest of it. Chris Parry first.
Yeah, I think in this two-block world, what we have to recognise is we're in a connected but contested world. And that ragged edge between those two blocks that I just mentioned are going to see all these, if you like, proxy wars like Ukraine. And it's going to be a fight, really, between those two blocks for the allegiance of every other country. So on that fault line between the two blocks, you're going to see commercial, diplomatic, military friction all the time. It's going to be seismic in its effect, I believe. Now, I think as far as tomorrow's concerned, what I reckon Russia will do is it will annex the whole of the south of Ukraine. I'm already seeing on Russian TV at the moment, Russia extending beyond the border and annexing Luhansk, Donbass, Crimea, and the bridge between them.
Forgive my ignorance, but from a military point of view, do you mean in the sense of declaring it annexed or actually making a new, fresh advance?
No, I think if you look at Russian maps on the TV at the moment, the red bit goes all the way across to Crimea, and if they could get to Odessa, they would have done.
So new alliances emerging, and you've worked in Australia, you've written and been published there as well. We all know the AUKUS deal and who builds submarines, and we don't mind putting the French nose out of joint if it means there's a better defence setup. That's all about the defence of the Pacific Rim. It's all about America's prime interest and our defence interest, be it Hong Kong, be it Japan, an ally, and the rest of it.
Yeah, I think this has highlighted just how ludicrously, dangerously vulnerable we have become and allowing ourselves to become so reliant on Russian oil and gas. And I think it's really, really important that we have this conversation now. As you say, you can't just open up, mini Rolls-Royce factory tomorrow. But what are we going to do? Is it going to be fracking? Is it going to be renewables? To me, that's a really exciting but also urgent debate that we need to have, that the UK government needs to have.
I think what's important, Alistair, is the UK isn't dependent, Europe is. UK gets most of its gas from Norway.
Yeah.
And so we've actually been quite smart in that respect. So we've diversified. But I can't stress enough now how much the democracies have to integrate their own energy and economic markets. You'll see China and Russia doing the same in terms of integrating their economies. And I think it's not just a strategic block on block. It's going to be economic, financial.
Let me bring Rory in at that point, as promised. Con, I hope you're still hearing, and I will come back to you in a moment. But this is now Rory McCallion, who writes about industry, innovation, international trade and the rest of it. I love that analogy about a petrol station and a filling station and what have you. But in terms of economic leverage, be it the supply of raw materials or finished products that we buy day in, day out in our shops, China is an absolute giant, and it sits there like an inscrutable giant, deciding who it'll back, who it'll play with. It could drop Russia just like that. Equally, it could embrace us.
Yes. The two economies are different. I mean, Russia is very much dominated by raw materials and is a commodity economy. In a way, it's almost a colonialist relationship with China, because if you go back to the empires, the European empires, we used to get raw materials from the colonies and process and manufacture them here and sell them back. Now, what China is doing, of course, it's probably the world's largest manufacturing economy now already. And yes, it is very powerful in that respect. And the way that it is run, it is a centrally controlled state capitalist
Yes.
economy.
I'd say it was market Leninism.
Yeah.
Well, it's what...
Well, Deng Xiaoping was the most important, other than Churchill, post-World War figure. I mean, in terms of introducing markets to China.
It's what the SWP used to call a state capitalist country, very definitely. And yes, because we have embraced the idea of getting everything manufactured cheap, we're taken to ludicrous extremes. Make it cheap where it is cheapest, sell it dear where it is most expensive. We've actually made ourselves extremely vulnerable. And we are vulnerable to supplies being cut off, whether it be gas and oil from Russia or neon for making microchips, whatever it may be. We need to look at making those supply chains a great deal shorter. It is happening. It has already started happening. Speaking to somebody from Cranfield Business School, he said that the COVID situation has actually accelerated what was already happening, the recognition that the long supply chains were vulnerable. So we're now looking at doing things much closer to home.
We've got about 5 minutes left, so I want to bring Con back into the conversation and just change it very slightly, because something emerged from what these three were just saying, and it's your fault because you set the ball rolling. But in 1945, those structures that you and I so enjoy talking about, and my good friends here have shed such informed light upon, who sat at the top table, who was a permanent member of the Security Council, the rest of it, they were the victors. They were the ones who had won, and obviously others were isolated, and that structure has remained. What everybody seems to be saying, and you set that ball rolling, is we now need global structures, if they are to be durable, that reflect more the economic reality of the world as it is now, as opposed to somebody who won a vitally important conflict 77 years ago. Is that the new League of Nations, United Nations? And here we go with take three.
Well, it's an interesting question, Alistair. I think, as Chris was saying, what you really need to see is the West countries that believe in democracy coming together. And I don't know what form that's going to take. I mean, remember, when the United Nations was formed, the Soviet Union was given a seat. Well, the Soviet Union no longer exists, but Russia has occupied that seat. So, I mean, all kinds of changes have taken place. And China's a relatively small power.
Yeah, absolutely.
Compared with the current orders today. But I think
Germany, the biggest and strongest economy in Europe, doesn't get a seat because, of course, it was on the losing side.
Yeah. So I think we just need to sort of look at how we can revive the Western alliance and not get so hung up about the UN. And frankly, there's been discussion about expanding NATO beyond the transatlantic sphere, and I would very much support that.
OK, Rory McCallion and then Chris Parry.
OK, I wanted to say that the UN has to renew itself, or we just have to look at the way that the global geopolitical structure is conducted. The UN has gone along with a sort of a cosy kind of actually Czechoslovakia 1938 type of situation where some unpleasant dictatorships and unpleasant regimes have been accommodated and have been appeased. You look at some of the regimes that are on the UN Human Rights Committee, for example, it's quite ridiculous that some of them should be there. We're seeing rise of dictatorships again. There's an awful lot of parallels from the 1930s which make uncomfortable reading.
Chris Parry.
I'm just going to re-emphasise we're in two blocks now. We're not in a globalised world. In every aspect and shape of our lives, the geometry has changed. And people will either have to go with the autocratic bloc or they'll have to go with the democratic bloc, depending on the interests of their elites. And it'll be a constantly shifting thing. I think Lord Palmerston has it absolutely right for today. He said, countries don't have permanent friends, they don't have permanent enemies, they have permanent interests. And countries will follow that now. The elites will in each country, and the legitimacy of those elites, whether it's in an autocratic regime or in a democratic regime, will determine which bloc they'll belong to. And I agree with Rory that everything, right down to supply chains, is going to be in a basically semi-global state.
In our first conversation, at the top of midday, as it were, you and I had fun, and they joined in as well, on the notion of leadership. And you used the word intellectual calibre of people. If we are to reset the order, and Con was saying particularly the United Nations, that's the key thing, because it currently as structured is not fit for purpose. we do have to find a meaningful way where that economic power balance that everybody's been talking about in this conversation is reflected, but peace is clung to as well. Yes, is that beyond the imagination, and I choose my words really carefully now, beyond man and woman right now?
Well, I'm so glad that on VE Day you used the word peace. It's terribly unfashionable to be... I'm a pacifist, and, you know, we have military experts and economic experts here. But I think we're underestimating the power of... We're all human beings, and sitting down and talking, that is extremely important as well. Well, what are we if we're not human beings living on this planet?
Yeah, but I'm afraid to say
Why can't we sit down and talk?
Because actually 50,000 years of caveman trumps 2,000 years of civilization even today. And I'm afraid to say, in a world where people believe that might is right, you have to be able to talk with a very big stick behind you. Otherwise, you won't survive very long. I said to somebody yesterday, in fact, the only way you can allow the lion to lay down with the lamb is by frequent replacement of the lamb into the way. It's as simple as that. Very good.
That was a brilliant analogy, and actually we got Con Cochran roaring out. There he is. I heard in my ear him laughing. Come on, give us a final thought on that. Whether we've got... I mean, you talk to these people at the highest levels, day in, day out, in New York, Washington, across Europe and here in London. Do we have the intellectual clout at the top table to come up with a better system?
I think we do. I think what I would say is we've lost the art of doing this. I think we have been, certainly in the last decade, living in an era of complacency. And with both Russia and China, the argument has been we have to engage with them intellectually, in business terms, in trade terms, and that will encourage good behaviour. Well, that has failed miserably, and so we now have to get our mojo back. We have to get the diplomatic initiatives, and we also need to demonstrate that we're cleverer, more resourceful, and also more united than our opponent.
We've got 2 minutes left, I've just been told in my ear, which is ideal because I've only got one final question, and I want to end on an optimistic note and hope you're right about peace, however much you were grimacing and growling, Admiral. But here's the point. Start with you, Con, and then come back to the studio guests. Do you believe, hope, pray, or not, that Zelensky's warning that if Putin is successful in Ukraine, next it will be Moldova, Georgia, Estonia, Latvia, all the way to Berlin. Do you believe now, on VE Day, that is no longer a realistic threat?
I do believe it's not a realistic threat. I think, given the state of the Russian military, it can hardly win its campaign in Donbass. So it is in no position to start threatening other countries. And, of course, there's been talk of it threatening Finland to stop it going into NATO. So I think Putin's done us a big favour because he's shown how weak he is. And I think we now understand the limits of his ambition.
Yeah. Con, great to talk to you. Come and see us any time. You'd always be most welcome. Is that now an idle threat?
I don't think it's an idle threat. I think that they may retrench for a period, having understood how weak they are, as Con said. But Emma, you said something about why can't we sit down and talk to people? Unfortunately, you can only have a dialogue if the other side wants to speak, is prepared to speak as well. Yeah. Now, when I was on here a couple of months ago, I talked about offering Putin a golden bridge. Yeah. As Charles Moore said in the Telegraph yesterday, it's the golden bridge, the off-ramp, whatever you want to call it, sadly has become a busted flush because he's not interested. And I'm very saddened by that. He has to be stopped there. He has to be shown not only that he's weak, but we have got the willingness to stand up to him.
Incredibly briefly, broadly optimistic or pessimistic?
Well, I think the future of Putin himself is extremely interesting. Whether he is long for this world, whether he can carry on being this crazed tyrant, I think that will dictate a lot of what happens.
Regroup, retrench and get more lambs.
He'll freeze the conflict from tomorrow, I think, and regroup. There's no question about that. But let's not kid ourselves. It's not just about Putin in Russia. No. There is a whole culture standing behind Putin saying, we are a great power, we have to demonstrate that, and we don't like being messed around by people like comedians and those small states of Western Europe.
Chris Parry, Emma Wolfe, Rory McCallion and Con Coughlin, who is now at home having a cup of tea, I hope. Thank you all very much. Fascinating and informative conversation. I hope you at home, watching it on television or listening on radio, found it as mind-opening as I did. Thank you all very, very much indeed. We're into the final half hour, just about, but we've plenty more still to come in that final half hour. After the break, we'll be crossing live to get all the action from Miami as the first Grand Prix there gets underway. But before that, let's bring you up to date with the weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking fine for most, with plenty of warm spring sunshine to enjoy. Let's take a look at the details. Southwest England will be warm and sunny, with just a little bit of low cloud floating around from time to time. Temperatures will reach close to 20 Celsius with light winds as well. Some afternoon cloud bubbling up across parts of southeast England and the London area, but it will stay dry with plenty of warm sunshine. Dry for Wales too, with further sunny spells, a little bit breezy towards the coast, but feeling warm in the sunshine as temperatures reach 21 Celsius. Dry across the Midlands and up into northwest England as well. Perhaps some low cloud lapping onto coastal stretches from time to time. Temperatures reaching 19 Celsius, that's well above average for early May. After a blue sky morning, the cloud will increase across northeast England this afternoon. However, there will be some sunny spells. Warm inland, but a little fresher along the coast. Much of Scotland will be fine with spells of warm sunshine, just the low risk of the odd shower developing, but most places will miss these and stay dry. Increasing cloud amounts from the west across Northern Ireland, with the best of the sunshine holding on across the far east of the country, highs reaching around 18 or 19 Celsius. Through into this evening, much of the UK will stay dry with some sunny spells ahead of dusk, and that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon. It's coming up to 1:30. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Sinn Féin's Vice President, Michelle O'Neill, says the party's victory ushers in a new era for Northern Ireland. The party won 27 seats in the election, overtaking the DUP, which dropped down to 25. The results mark the first time that a nationalist or Republican party will form the largest grouping in Stormont. Secretary of State Brandon Lewis has called on the parties to form an executive as soon as possible. Senior Tories are accusing Sir Keir Starmer of hypocrisy as details emerged into allegations that he broke lockdown rules last year. The Mail on Sunday has published a leaked memo which appears to suggest that a beer and curry event attended by the Labour leader and his deputy, Angela Rayner, was pre-planned. Sir Keir insists that no lockdown rules were broken. However, police in Durham are investigating. He's resisting calls to resign, despite previously saying that the Prime Minister should step down over parties at number 10. The Prime Minister says he'll deliver a so-called Super 7 of Brexit bills in the Queen's speech on Tuesday, which he says will cut red tape inherited from the European Union. Boris Johnson told the Sunday Express that the new laws range from data reform to financial services, allowing Britain to thrive as a, quote, modern, dynamic and independent country. He's also expected to unveil measures to help struggling town centres, including plans to force landlords to rent out empty shops. Ukrainian fighters at the besieged Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol have vowed to continue fighting as long as they are alive. The deputy commander of the regiment sheltering in the plant says they do not have much time left as they're under intense shelling. It comes as President Zelensky announced that all 300 women, children and elderly people have been rescued from the steelworks. We're on TV, online and on DAB+. This is GB News. Now it's back to Alastair Stewart and friends.
Ray, thank you very much indeed. A little bit of brum brum now. And Formula One Championship leader Charles Leclerc will start on pole position for the inaugural Miami Grand Prix after leading a Ferrari 1-2 in a fiercely fought qualifying as top spot slipped through Max Verstappen's fingers. Well, despite Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff announcing that they had a few things up their sleeve for the weekend, Lewis Hamilton starts in sixth place with former teammate Valtteri Bottas in front of him in fifth place. Ouch. After a strong beginning from George Russell, he, in fact, will start today in 12th position. Delighted now to be joined by my good friend Philip Duncan, who is the man in the know, PA's F1 correspondent, and there he is actually in Miami. Set the scene a little bit for us, because you and I are biased and partial, but there are European Grand Prix, which go back decades. There are the Middle Eastern Grand Prix, which have fantastic brand new circuits, and then there's Miami.
Yeah, welcome to Miami, Alistair. Obviously, as you said, for the first time in Formula One history. Yeah, it's a great coup, really, in many ways for Formula One to be over here in the US, in Miami. Obviously, one of two races this year. We've got another one in Austin at the end of the year, and it'll be one of three races next year when Las Vegas joins the calendar. So, yeah, obviously it's been a key mission, really, for F1's owners, Liberty Media, to expand the calendar, to have races in America. And Miami was their first sort of big capture. Obviously, they probably would have preferred it to be downtown. It's racing around the Hard Rock Stadium. So it's not really in Miami. It's in Miami Gardens, 15 miles north of the city, at a track, constructed, for this event. So we have to see how the event pans out later on, how the race goes. But it's a good coup for F1 to be over here in Miami.
And it is quite interesting if you like motorsport. If you don't, then we apologise to those listening to us or watching us. But if you think American motorsport, you tend to think of either the amazing touring cars or Indianapolis going round and round faster and faster in a circle. So the very nature of F1 driving, straights, curves, slides, it's a totally different kind of race.
Yeah, totally. And it's something quite new, I guess, to the American audience. As you say, they're used to Indy 500 and NASCAR, etc. And F1's really seen as a European sport. But such has been the success of Netflix over the past few years, the Drive to Survive series, and also the championship battle between Max and Lewis. That the sport's attracted a new audience, and you can see that here in Miami. It's quite a lot of young faces, a different demographic perhaps to what we've been used to in the last decades of Formula One. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they think the event's gone or goes today. As like you say, they're not necessarily used to Formula One, but it's a sport that they're growing to like because of things such as the Netflix series.
Yeah, while you were saying all of that, and I agree with every word of it, for those listening to our conversation on radio, we were showing some pictures of qualification and also practice, and saw Red Bull spin out there and a Ferrari spin out as well. You know perfectly well I'm a Lewis Hamilton Mercedes fan. Was I sold a dummy by Toto Wolff, who said we may have a few tricks up our sleeve for Miami? I mean, he's behind Bottas.
Yeah, I think they were hoping that these upgrades or these tricks, as you say, that they brought over here to the States would have a bit more of an effect than they have had, really. You know, Hamilton is a slightly better starting position, 6th, than it was last time out over in Imola, where he was way down in 14th and finished 13th, one of his worst weekends. But, you know, he'll hardly be singing from the rooftops, starting from 6th. This is the 7-time world champion, you know, and he's 8/10ths off the pace. So still a long way back from Mercedes, as you said earlier at the top. George Russell way down in 12th. So, yeah, I think they would have hoped to have, that these upgrades, these tricks would have brought more of an impact to this race, but they're still a long, long way behind. And, you know, although Hamilton's further forward, he's not really in contention for the victory today. It's more if he can really make the odd 1 or 2 places, get ahead of Bottas, his former teammate, for example, yes, and maybe fourth or fifth. But I think a podium, if all the other guys stay on track, Red Bull and Ferrari is going to be out of reach, really.
I reckon there's only one thing worse than being behind Bottas, and that was if Nico Rosberg came back to racing and he was behind Nico. That would be completely unacceptable. Final point, I want to pick up on something, because 1 or 2 people have been in touch to comment upon it, and let's have 30 quick seconds on it, if you'd be so kind. The irony that Netflix is helping a huge broadcast competitor like Liberty because of a programme that it does, driving audiences to a sport that Liberty cover.
Yeah, there's a massive irony in that, of course, isn't there? But it benefits, you know, both parties, really, doesn't it? It's certainly benefiting Liberty in the sense that they're being able to grow this sport over here. So it's really win-win, really, for perhaps both parties. So Netflix have signed up for another 2 series. So that's obviously the way that the way that Liberty Media see that the sport's evolving. So, yeah, win-win, I would suggest.
Great stuff. All right, have a great time and look after yourself, and thank you for finding time for us on what I know is an incredibly busy weekend for you, Philip. Thank you very much indeed. That's Philip Duncan, the F1 correspondent with PA Sport. You're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends, and we've plenty more to come in the final 24 minutes of the programme, including crossing over live to Darren McCaffrey, our political editor in Northern Ireland, to find out how the atmosphere is developing there after Sinn Féin's historic win in terms of the seat count, but it's more complex than that. But first, let's bring you right up to date with all of the latest news headlines. Here's Ray.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. 20 minutes to 2, and you're watching and listening to Alastair Stewart and friends here on GB News. So all of the counts are in from all of the local elections across the UK, and it genuinely has been a monumental weekend for many of us. But what do all of those results mean for the United Kingdom, and how will it impact upon us and the Prime Minister moving forward? Let's start with what was the most complicated and the final full set of results to come in, and that is in Northern Ireland. And I'm delighted to say that we're joined now by our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, and there he is. We were working together on Thursday when we saw lots of the stuff come in, and then you've been there as this extraordinary story has unfolded. So in the cold light of a Sunday afternoon, Darren, what's your take?
Well, in many ways, Alistair, I think lots has changed, but not that much has changed here in Belfast. You're right in saying an historic weekend, the first time a nationalist party has managed to win the Assembly elections. They are the largest party, Sinn Féin, now with 27 MLAs, that's members of the Legislative Assembly at Stormont. That is 2 ahead of the main unionist party, the DUP, who are on 25. The Alliance Party, that cross-community group who say they're neither nationalist or unionist, they're the real winners now of this election, more than doubling their seats to 17. In saying that, as I said, it is all change, but it is also no change, because fundamentally tomorrow morning MLAs are going to go to Stormont here in Belfast, but in the end, are they going to be able to form a government? I think at this stage that seems unlikely, Alistair, and the reason I say that is because the DUP seem pretty reticent to go back into government with Sinn Féin until they say the Northern Ireland Protocol, that Brexit deal that the UK signed up to with the EU a couple of years ago, until it is sorted, they fear and feel that it divides the UK between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, that it is economically disadvantaging Northern Ireland, and they want it either substantially changed or scrapped altogether. And frankly, they're refusing to do anything until the British government acts on that. Will the government do anything? Well, we're going to have to wait and see. They keep promising they're going to do something. They haven't thus far, and I suspect we may not see the Northern Irish Executive up and running until that happens.
Sure. Arlene Foster was saying on this programme earlier, and also when she was talking to our mutual friend Deanna Davidson and Paul Embry on their programme, Political Correction, that she did think there would be something in the Queen's speech, but she genuinely didn't know what at this juncture, because obviously she's not First Minister anymore, but she has her ear to the ground. I'm not quite sure that I can see what Boris Johnson's government can do by way of primary legislation in Westminster that's going to change much in what is essentially an international treaty and deal.
Well, I think the British government have got kind of 3 options open to them. The one that they say they favour is trying, Alistair, I think, to negotiate with the European Union, to try and get a deal, to try and say to the EU that they feel that the current protocol is undermining the Good Friday Agreement, is undermining consent in Northern Ireland, simply because most unionists don't agree with it, and that it needs to be changed, even if that is not necessarily what the EU would like to see in regards to the single market. I think, second of all, they could trigger Article 16. That would effectively suspend the entire protocol. Or they could do, and this is what's been suggested in the Queen's speech, we don't know what's going to happen, or they could legislate that there would be primary legislation in UK law that could override parts of the protocol. So rather than getting rid of it altogether, you would simply not apply all of it all of the time. In saying that, I'm pretty sure the EU would not like that, and they may well respond. And that's why this is really tricky in the end, because this is not just about Northern Ireland, this is about our relationships, about the UK's relationship with the EU post-Brexit.
Absolutely. And the final point, which I find genuinely intriguing, as you pointed out with great clarity, that if you do the actual vote count as opposed to the number of seats, then it's at least 40, maybe a little bit more percentage in favour of the retention of the union and the relationship with the rest of the United Kingdom. So even if there were a border poll, it is unlikely that Sinn Féin would win that, if, and it's a huge if. But I was intrigued when Michelle O'Neill, the vice president of Sinn Féin and the boss in Northern Ireland, said, and I quote, "There have been useful conversations and I think they are ongoing, they are going to continue." What's she talking about?
Well, I think in many regards, Sinn Féin clearly feel that they've got a sense of momentum behind them. You know, as I say, for the first time in the history of this country for 101 years, a nationalist party, a party that frankly does not want to see Northern Ireland exist, it is now going to be the largest party here. This also comes at a time in which Sinn Féin, according to opinion polls over the last couple of years consistently, are the most popular party in the Republic of Ireland, down south in the rest of Ireland. And it is possible in the next couple of years that you could see Sinn Féin in power, in control to a large degree here in Stormont and also down in Dublin, pushing for that border poll. But let's be clear about this, and you've rightly just pointed it out, that the nationalist vote has stayed pretty consistent over the last couple of decades at around 40%. The unionist vote has stayed pretty consistent. It's dropped a little bit, but pretty consistent too. There's a large bloc who clearly can't make up their minds at the moment, but there is no sign that there is a majority, let alone an overwhelming majority, for United Ireland here in Northern Ireland. And until we get to that point, frankly, there won't be a referendum. And even then, it's so complicated, Alistair. This is not Scottish independence. This isn't a country leaving the UK. This is reunification, and my word, that is going to be a jolly complicated process that, frankly, and I think Sinn Féin know this themselves, is going to be a decade, if not decades-long progress. It's not something that's going to happen in a couple of years' time.
It's absolutely fascinating stuff. Get those history books out, as we both so love to do. Darren McCaffrey, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for finding time on your busy Sunday afternoon, and keep in touch. I look forward to seeing you again back in the studio soon. Thank you. GB News political editor Darren McCaffrey there on home ground, and few people know the politics of Northern Ireland better than he. And his detailed analysis is always worth reflecting upon. Finally, we have 14 minutes left on the programme. I wanted a calm, objective reflection on all of the local elections last week, and there's only one person I felt totally confident inviting to offer that, and it is the number cruncher, as I always call him. There he is, Professor Sir John Curtis. Let's just nod a little, if we may, John, because it does matter, clearly, to the Northern Ireland thing that Darren and I were just talking about, and before him, Arlene Foster. Do you sense that the Sunday Times is closer to... John's gone. Can we reinstate him? Bear with me for this technical point. I'm going to read you some emails from comments that folk have sent in while we make absolutely sure that link is secure. Do not interrupt me until you've got the line secure, as it were. I say that with affection. Helen has sent an email saying GB News must campaign for Jean and Pat Outram to be awarded damehoods, not just for their heroic war effort, but for serving their whole lives. The two wonderful women who were with Tessa Dunlop, who were reflecting upon VE Day a little earlier. It really is magic. If you didn't see it, go onto YouTube and try and find it. And Elaine says, thank you to those lovely ladies who gave us our liberty. What do you make of the lack of voting today? It was a wonderful interview. Very kind of you. And finally, Karen says, thanks so much for the marvellous interview with the truly amazing Outram sisters and the historian Tessa. It was a true joy and delight, and I'm proud to be British. You always have fabulous friends. We've still got a technical problem, so I'm going to carry on with these, because I'm not going to risk going to John until we've repaired it, because that would irritate me, him and you. Rita says, oh, Alistair, thank you so much for sharing with us, your loyal viewers, this wonderful, wonderful interview. We truly owe so much to the likes of Pat and Jean, heroic, genuine and sincere, so humble and respectful, I am left teary-eyed. Rita, that's terribly kind of you, and I repeat, I owe it to my good friend Dr. Tessa Dunlop, who arranged it all. And I'm going to say this once more, but if you didn't see the interview, do try and seek it out on YouTube, because there are two magical moments where I say, what is that medal? And she says, oh, that's just the Légion d'honneur. And then the final answer, she, as a throwaway line, says, well, I was a producer on The Sky at Night working at the BBC. I mean, truly remarkable women. Angie says, for the first time, I didn't vote Conservative. Interesting. But it had nothing to do with Partygate. It was based on whether they are delivering on manifest promises, and they aren't. Illegal migration is getting worse again. Health system is in a mess. Taxes higher than ever. I won't vote for a party that breaks its promises so stupendously. Angie, you might like to read what John Redwood has written in today's Sunday Telegraph. He echoes quite a lot of that. Virginia says the Tories lost votes because MPs are not backing the Prime Minister and giving the Tories a name for being self-centred snobs. Local elections are about local issues, not usually over party matters. The Tories will win the next election. The result's been massively exaggerated by the other parties, especially the Lib Dems. The Bank of England haven't got a clue. That we talked about that with Hugh Ormond yesterday, about him saying they hadn't got an economic Scooby-Doo. Anyway, Virginia says the Bank of England haven't got a clue, and this is not just the United Kingdom, but all over the globe. We should be encouraging credit, and we should encourage responsibility for the individual. Mark comes in on Partygate versus Beergate all over the newspapers this morning. If, as now seems likely, Sir Keir Starmer is found to have broken the lockdown rules, there is a problem which needs to be addressed. It seems clear that Boris's alleged party had a detrimental effect on the Conservative result on election day, as the suppression of the police investigation into Beergate until after the election means that people were voting without full knowledge, if true, of the gross false bias spun by Labour. Therefore, is the result of the election still valid? If not, what should be done? The truthful answer to that, and it's a very actual thoughtful intervention there, is nothing. Because unless you can try and report it to the Electoral Commission and say that malpractice, but I don't think you would get anywhere. But it's certainly a point that is worth reflecting on. Thanks for all of that. I'm being told, and I hope it's absolutely spot on, that we can now go to John Curtis. John, can you hear me all right?
I can indeed. Sorry, Alistair, little technical problems.
Don't worry at all. A quick one, I said, to pick up the momentum on Northern Ireland. As you will have seen, the Sunday Times goes on, Sinn Féin win reawakens Brexit tensions. It's all about the protocol and the rest of it. Whereas the Observer and one or two others go on, seismic Sinn Féin victory fuels debate on the very future of the Union. Do you believe that the Union is once again more in play, particularly given what happened in Wales and indeed what happened in Scotland?
Well, the truth is the Union's been more in play ever since the 2016 referendum, simply because a majority of people, both in Northern Ireland and in Scotland, voted to remain inside the European Union. And in the wake of that, both in Scotland and in Northern Ireland, support for leaving the Union has increased. Yeah. But of course, the most immediate impact of Brexit in Northern Ireland is that it's the story of Brexit that seems to be primarily responsible for the fragmentation of the Unionist vote in Northern Ireland, and that's the principal reason why Sinn Féin are ahead. Sinn Féin's own vote is only up by a point. Yeah. But basically a minority of Unionists voted to remain. They are relatively happy with the Northern Ireland Protocol. They might not happy to see it improved, but they're not necessarily regarding, they prioritise being inside the EU single market. But of course, the majority of unionists are unhappy about the Northern Ireland Protocol, and some of them, as a result, wandered off from the DUP towards traditional unionist voice. And so basically, the Northern Ireland Protocol isn't acceptable to a large number of unionists. And it's that legacy of Brexit, that's still, frankly, not resolved legacy of Brexit, that's responsible for the result.
And the increase in the vote and good results for the Alliance middle ground party, I put it to Arlene Foster that, in a sense, that was a big old chunk of voters saying, for God's sake, just get on with it.
Well, yes, and of course it's also a chunk of voters that again are opposed to Brexit. The Northern Ireland Alliance doesn't take a position on the constitutional question, but it takes a very clear view on Brexit. And yes, that's very much where the minority of Remain Unionist voters have been inclined to go. There are other things going on. The truth is that gradually in Northern Ireland, there is a group of younger people who don't necessarily identify as either nationalist or unionist, and they regard themselves as being Northern Irish. And it's that group that the Alliance has been gradually managing to increase its appeal by appealing to. So there are some long-term demographic changes going on in Northern Ireland that, in a sense, also matter and are being registered by this election.
Brilliant. And finally, the Curtis take on the overview. When I was covering the results with Darren and others on Friday, I jotted down on my trusty notepad Keir Starmer saying, it's a turning point, it's a breakthrough. I also jotted down next to that Yvette Cooper, Ed Bull's wife, saying, we're making progress, it is a work in progress. Is Labour over-gilding what they did achieve on Thursday, Friday?
Well, what they did was to take among the various choices of past relatively poor election results they invited us to compare them with, they chose the 2019 general election, which of course was the worst of all. I think the real test for Sir Keir Starmer was indeed the comparison with 2018, because that happened to be Jeremy Corbyn's best local election performance. And Sir Keir is wanting to convince us that he's able to take the Labour Party to electoral heights that Jeremy Corbyn couldn't achieve. And basically, once you take a look at the votes since 2018, yes, Labour gained seats, but that's because the Conservatives were down. The Labour vote probably slightly down on 2018, certainly no better. And so therefore, yeah, Labour certainly recovered from the disaster of the local elections of last year and from the disaster of the 2019 general election. But this wasn't the kind of performance that suggested, A, the party is really advancing to new heights, and B, certainly not one that suggests, at the moment at least, it's likely to win an overall majority.
We'll have to continue it any time at your convenience. Thank you so much. Sorry we had the technical hiccup. The great John Curtis. Continue the conversation at any time. Thank you so much for joining us this weekend. I'll see you again next Saturday, 12 till 2, here on GB News TV and Radio. Have a very good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking fine for most, with plenty of warm spring sunshine to enjoy. Let's take a look at the details. Southwest England will be warm and sunny, with just a little bit of low cloud floating around from time to time. Temperatures will reach close to 20 Celsius with light winds as well. Some afternoon cloud bubbling up across parts of southeast England and the London area, but it will stay dry with plenty of warm sunshine. Dry for Wales too, with further sunny spells, a little bit breezy towards the coast, but feeling warm in the sunshine as temperatures reach 21 Celsius. Dry across the Midlands and up into northwest England as well. Perhaps some low cloud lapping onto coastal stretches from time to time. Temperatures reaching 19 Celsius, that's well above average for early May. After a blue sky morning, the cloud will increase across northeast England this afternoon. However, there will be some sunny spells. Warm inland, but a little fresher along the coast. Much of Scotland will be fine with spells of warm sunshine, just the low risk of the odd shower developing, but most places will miss these and stay dry. Increasing cloud amounts from the west across Northern Ireland, with the best of the sunshine holding on across the far east of the country, highs reaching around 18 or 19 Celsius. Through into this evening, much of the UK will stay dry with some sunny spells ahead of dusk, and that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of